Globalization is making the rich world even richer, but billions are locked out. They're living on the edge between the rich world and the poor. They face tough choices if they want to join the party. Countries like Uganda, they may have to make peace with some terrible people if they're to progress. But how do you make peace with the devil if your friends in the West want to put him on trial? It's as if nothing's changed. They're working these fields just as they did that day 21 years ago. Madalena Rakot and John Odongo knew about the fighting between rebel groups and the government army here in northern Uganda. They didn't know the rebels had entered their village. Their 9-year-old nephew was abducted. For years, they believed Dominic dead. But recently, there have been reports that Dominic's alive. Seeing these photographs, Madalena and John are convinced he's their nephew, this handsome man who smiles out at them.
He's the spitting image of you now. That one's really captured him.
The man in the photograph is Dominic Ongwen. The last name means born at the time of the white ant. Little is known for sure of Ongwen. There's at least one other account of his parentage. What we do know is he grew up with rebel soldiers of the Lord's Resistance Army as his new family. He was a star pupil, a lieutenant to their leader, Joseph Kony, and eventually a brigade commander. And as such, he is now wanted as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. An abducted child among the world's most wanted? This first attempt at globalizing criminal justice has divided the community here.
My heart is very angry. He should be arrested if at all possible.
He said he was abducted when he was very young, so he's innocent.
We of Lamogi, we are ready to welcome him home. And everybody willing to meet Ongwen.
The ICC has indicted commanders of the LRA that are alleged to have committed serious crimes of international concern.
So who is Dominic Ongwen? Monstrous war criminal or child victim of war? It's a dilemma for justice. On the 24th of July 2002, rebels from the Lord's Resistance Army overran the village of Pajong. They came to kill. The rebel leaders who'd ordered them here included Dominic Ongwen, the white ant.
My 2-year-old was sitting on the veranda. The rebels started kicking him. They kicked him to death. I had my 5-year-old with me when the female rebel commander ordered all of us with children to pick them up and smash them against the veranda poles. We had to hit them until they were dead. All of us with children, we had to kill them. If you did it slowly, they would beat you and force you to hit your children harder against the poles. In all, 7 children were killed by their mothers like that. My own child was only 5.
Esther Achan's life was destroyed that night. Her husband, too, was hacked to death by machete-wielding child rebels. Her daughter Doreen was 7. When rebels came for her, Doreen raced into the bush. She survived. Esther and the other women were instructed to lie face down and prepare to be beheaded. In silence, they did so. Somehow, they were spared. NCO Onyango was close by that night.
I heard shooting. We ran away to the bush. In the morning, we came to see what was happening in Pajong. We saw the dead bodies lying there. So we started to collect the dead bodies. The numbers were killed. There were about 56 people who were killed in that very day.
Pajong used to be a sprawling village of around 500 people. All were subsistence farmers. Now the villagers have gathered their huts together for safety. They're too scared to work their fields. The war is not over yet. A ceasefire and peace talks have raised hopes. But until those hopes are fulfilled, nobody strays far from the compound. Memories of that July night govern their lives. Eterina's husband was maimed. Her son and a daughter were killed. Grace was abducted along with 36 other children, taken by the rebels to be LRA fighters. She, unlike many, escaped. The rebels moved on to the next settlement, then the next, killing, kidnapping and looting all that night. Esther wants justice.
I am very bitter and angry. I want the people who did this to be arrested and brought before a court for the wrong they have done, for the terrible things they did to innocent children.
There seems little chance of justice. No police have been to investigate, no military.
No one came.
But there is hope that Esther's dream will be fulfilled. Because some do want justice. They are the officials of the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and they're here in northern Uganda.
The ICC has a mandate, and the mandate is to prosecute those that are most responsible for serious commission of crimes of international concern, crimes of genocide, of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Its own contribution is justice, justice to the victims, justice to the many people that have been affected by the war.
The court has a short history. It was created in 2002. Its mandate to bring some of the gravest criminals in the world to justice. Maria Kamara's job is raising awareness of how the court can help people here.
Because of the level of atrocities committed on the villages where the people stay, they have to leave and go out in the fields, in camps. The whole of Acholi region were directly affected. That entire population was displaced.
Rice, sesame seed and oranges once flourished here. Now the fields are largely unworked. Up to 2 million people have been driven from their homes, almost all forced to live on handouts. The war's been a huge obstacle to Uganda's development. The hope was the International Criminal Court could help end the war, bringing rebel leaders to justice while their followers were forgiven.
The ICC has not indicted the LRA as an institution. The ICC has indicted commanders of the LRA that are alleged to have committed serious crimes of international concern. In this case, the 4 that are most responsible for those heinous crimes that were committed during the war.
Joseph Kony, founder of the LRA, and 3 of his commanders are now among the most wanted men in the world. After the indictments, LRA leaders briefly emerged from the bush for peace talks, where these remarkable pictures were taken. While a ceasefire was agreed, the indictments have complicated the talks. Still, they do send a clear message that the world won't tolerate the kind of crimes allegedly committed by men like Dominic Ongwen. His Senior Brigade, reportedly responsible for the atrocities in Esther's village.
I heard from the abductees that Ongwen Dominic is the overall commander in this area. They told us Ongwen deployed those people to loot, to abduct the people, to join them, because those people, they are going to be their force. That's what they told us.
It seems so simple. War crimes in Pajong, try the men responsible. But the peace talks make that politically difficult. Nobody in Pajong had heard of the ICC till we told them. Esther was clearly on side.
I want the commander, the one who ordered the killings, to be arrested. If that commander hadn't ordered the killings, the children wouldn't have been killed. The commanders themselves must be held responsible.
What's more, she says she's willing to testify herself if called to give evidence against the killers.
I will tell everything regardless of the consequences. I have seen so much death. I've got nothing to fear.
And yet Esther is almost alone in supporting the ICC. Her friends are scared the arrest warrants will jeopardize the peace process. They believe that offering complete forgiveness to all their persecutors is the only way to lure the rebels from their camps and end the war. They'd sacrifice the chance to avenge the deaths of their children and even forgive Ongwen for the chance of peace.
There is no way they can compensate for all the killing. But we want them out of the bush living normally. Because what's the use of the law if the killings can't be stopped? We shouldn't have to continue this suffering. We want them out. We don't care about anything else.
And after 20 years of war, Eterina's view is echoed by most people across northern Uganda. The ICC warrants, with the threat of life in prison, they say, will leave the indicted commanders no choice but to continue fighting in the bush.
I think this court of justice, it can't help us. It can't help us. What is going to help us if those people are off from the bush, if they are all of them with us here, we stay together with them, there's no war. We think that is the best way.
The people of North Uganda say they have their own way of resolving the conflict. These two men are former rebels. Abducted by the LRA and forced to fight, they both murdered civilians. The elders are calling on Ojakalo, the fearful one, to appease the spirits of the dead. These traditional beliefs are utterly different to the punitive and exemplary justice practiced elsewhere in the world. Here there's a deeply ingrained belief that forgiveness and reconciliation are the best way forward. Animal blood is the payment. Paying compensation and offering true repentance are the basis of these rituals. They're meant to draw a line under the past and enable the men and the clan to move forward. Ruatatinga is the head of Dominic Ongwen's clan.
Here in Asholi, we have our way to finish when someone kills somebody. We have a law also. We have a regulation which actually can finish their problem. That's why we tell the ICC, why not you leave everything to us and we finish in a good way and let the peace be here in Asholi for good.
In the as yet unsigned peace treaty, traditional justice would be recognised in Ugandan law. LRA killers could be brought to account, pay for their actions, and then be absolved. All except for the 4 top commanders indicted by the ICC. They'd still face an international court. Clan elders say traditional justice should be universal. Just as this man is earning forgiveness, so too, they say, could Dominic Ongwen.
People are crying. They say ICC is the one making a mistake because those people, they are supposed to come, they fear the arrest warrant of ICC. If the arrest warrant of ICC was not there, our people are all already back home because they are fearing only the ICC.
Kongi has never been ready for any form of accountability.
For the ICC, Maria Kamara believes such faith in traditional justice is an illusion.
This traditional justice system you're talking about, it only started coming because the ICC is here, and now people are saying, let's look for an escape route, let's forget about the ICC, and let's do traditional justice. Correct me if I'm wrong. We only started hearing about this system of justice because the ICC is here now. First, we didn't want to hear anything about accountability.
She's trying to persuade these secondary school teachers of the importance of the ICC to their future. A future without true accountability and justice, she says, is a future not worth having. But in the middle of sensitive, stumbling peace negotiations, it's a hard sell. She's preaching to a congregation with a very different set of beliefs than lawyers in The Hague.
And the majority are saying that they are ready to forgive Cohen if he comes back. Because what they need is peace, not the court.
The point here is the ICC will say it's not a barrier to the peace. People, let's be honest, we are Ugandans, and we have been following the peace process in this country. There had been many failed peace processes, over 10 of them, even before the ICC came. Am I saying the truth or not? Yeah.
She may be right. The rebels may have no intention of pursuing peace. But is the threat of life in prison the best way to encourage them? To complicate this dilemma, meet the woman who calls herself Dominic Ongwen's wife. Florence Ayot was a rebel for 18 years. Like thousands of former rebels, she's benefited from an amnesty act which builds on the tradition of forgiveness. She has an official card to prove it.
At first, I didn't understand, but then other rebel commanders explained what amnesty meant. And I understood I was forgiven. I could live a normal life.
Can an amnesty card absolve her? Well, there are extenuating circumstances. Like most rebels, Florence was abducted when she was a child. She says she was just 9.
When I was abducted, my parents were at home. I didn't know it at the time, but the same day, my parents were captured and beaten to death by the same rebels who took me. My brother was burned to death in a vehicle on the road, and his 3 children were killed.
Tens of thousands of children have been taken as fighters, servants, or sex slaves for the LRA commanders. At 13, Florence, like all abducted girls, was given to a commander as a so-called wife. She also became a senior rebel in her own right.
I started as a lance corporal and then corporal, staff sergeant, RCM, second lieutenant, 1 star and 3 stars. I fought in many of the fiercest battles.
She's plainly pleased with her achievements. She made it to head of all the LRA women, part of Joseph Kony's inner circle, the so-called control altar. In her new rebel family, the victim became perpetrator. When her first commander was killed, Florence was passed on to Dominic Ongwen.
You never heard him quarreling with anyone. He would sit with his women and tell us stories. He would chat and play. We all lived freely with him.
Florence had 2 children with Ongwen, a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. One day, her eldest child from her previous commander was shot and killed. Fearing for the lives of her other children, she ran away from the LRA. Now she takes in washing to scrape a living for herself and Ongwen's children. She's waiting in hope for the White Ant to join her. Is right, she says, because he too is innocent.
Dominic used to tell us he was abducted when he was very young. Everything he did was in the name of Joseph Cohen, so he's innocent. In my view, the ICC warrants should be removed. As long as they are there, they are a stumbling block to peace. But the commanders used to tell us if the ICC warrants were taken away, then everything would be okay.
But what of the thousands of victims killed, maimed and abducted? The millions driven from their homes? Maria Kamara and the ICC feel they have a duty to the victims. Tonight she's the special guest on a radio talk show in the town of Lira. Many people here are still unaware of the existence of the ICC and what it stands for.
Good evening, listeners.
She spells out the ICC's punishments.
The ICC does not have the death penalty. Punishment at the end of a trial will range from life imprisonment, that is in extreme cases, to a maximum of 30 years imprisonment. Therefore,
Tonight, listeners accuse the ICC of being a paper tiger, a global court without global police.
It's very correct. The ICC, as an international criminal court, it does not have its police force. The countries that came together to form the ICC agreed that the states will have the sole responsibility to enforce arrest warrant. Now it is the responsibility of countries, especially the state of Uganda, to enforce the arrest warrant against the first suspect.
Her audience knows the Ugandan army spent 20 years trying to capture LRA leaders and failed. Listeners are concerned ICC warrants will jeopardize the longed-for peace. And peace above all is what they want. John and Magdalena, who believe Dominic is their nephew, have been too scared to farm since the late 80s. Today, thanks to the ceasefire, they're back, clearing their overgrown fields.
We just want peace to come, because without it, nothing good can happen here.
It's hard to predict what will happen.
And here, the final twist to this dilemma. The day Madalena was driven from her village was the last day she saw Dominic. She'd left him babysitting her newborn daughter, Christine.
I found my baby left on the road, crying. Dominic had left her there. I was furious. But then my neighbors told me he had been abducted. I ran to tell his mother and father. His father started crying, and the mother wailing, screaming, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do now?" But the rebels were still in the area, and they grabbed the two of them and started beating them, saying, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" One of them picked up a hoe and he cracked open Dominic's father's head with that hoe. Cracked it right open. Then one of them told the rest of us to run. He grabbed a spear and threw it at me. It narrowly missed my back, but I got away. Everyone I left behind in the village was killed.
Yes, the ICC's first prosecution could be against a former child soldier whose parents were killed by his abductors. The precise facts remain shrouded in mystery, but this is a story which confounds both justice and morality. Florence could become a key witness if Dominic Ongwen ever comes to court. But she's never been approached to give evidence, despite having been so close to Dominic. She says she is ready to tell the truth, but she would be scared.
I would speak out if it doesn't backfire on me. I've been frightened since I've been back, because as a former commander, I'm scared that something could be still held against me and bring trouble for me.
Florence's story is at the heart of this dilemma. She was a senior rebel commander, veteran of fierce battles, and possibly responsible for civilian killings. Yet she's now living like most other young mothers in Gulu, striving to bring up her children in the best way she can. Is her story an example of the success of forgiveness or capitulation in the face of evil? Back in the village of Pajong, the Church of St. Janani Luwum worships in the local primary school. They're singing today of being saved from the evils of Satan. But Esther's determined to do more than pray to God for help. With no man to support her, she has to work hard to provide for her two surviving children. Like the ICC, she wants justice for her family. She'd be willing to give evidence in court. She's brave. The LRA have still not signed the peace and remain in the bush. She's scared of repercussions.
Maybe they'll kill me, but as the ICC want to finish this thing, then I accept, because at least they're willing to pursue it, now that Uganda has failed.
Watering can. Again? Watering can. Again? Watering can.
In Form P1 of the Holy Rosary Primary School in Gulu, Dominic Ongwen's little girl, now out of the bush, is learning English. Esther can't afford to send her 2 children to school. Her 15-year-old boy has just had to drop out, as Esther can't make enough money to pay the fees. It may be left to their generation to resolve the dilemma of the white ant. The indicted war criminal's daughter is aptly called Mercy.